I am Commissioner Darrell Glenn. I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out on your Saturday to come to this meeting. I know a lot of you probably have kids that are playing basketball and all these other things, so I understand how tough it is to be able to do this. But I felt it was extremely important for the commissioners to actually sponsor some meetings with regard to this I-25 widening project. It's something that's very near and dear to our hearts, especially if you live in this region. It's something that is tremendous when you start thinking about the safety impacts. And in my opinion, when I've been doing this, whether from a city council level and county commissioner level since 2003, my concern has always been fighting for this region and making sure that we're receiving our fair share of transportation dollars with regard to how much we actually pay into the system. That has always been a core function that I believe is something that we need to stand and fight for. So for today, what we're going to do is I'm giving you the kind of the overview of what's going to happen, but then I'm going to have Commissioner Mark Wallace. He's going to make a few comments, turn it over to our CDOT representative. But the majority of the time I want to be for you. I want you to be able to feel like you can give us your feedback on some of your issues, whether you're in support of the proposal that's going on right now, if you have concerns, or you just you have a recommendation on having to make the project a little bit better. My focus is I want to make sure you have a voice. That's my overall objective. So before we continue to proceed, I want to make sure that you see our fellow commissioners that are here. I'll allow them to introduce themselves real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Mark Waller.
Well, good morning. Thank you for coming out today. Very appreciative of seeing all the people out here so that we can get your input, because that's what we're here for. We want to hear from the residents and our constituents to get the feedback for what's the smart thing to do, the best thing to do. So I appreciate that. I'm Lojinos Gonzalez. I represent District 4, which is the southern and eastern portion of El Paso County.
And hello, I'm Stan Vanwerf, El Paso County Commissioner, and I represent the west side. That is predominantly everything west of I-25, but it does include Palmer Lake and downtown Monument proper. And I'm really looking forward to the questions that you have. If you don't have a question, I ask that you prepare to ask a question, because to Commissioner Glenn's point, today is an opportunity for citizens to ask the commissioners and also to ask CDOT, who's represented here, about what your concerns are or suggestions and so forth. So please think about that and be prepared for a question. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stan. And by the way, I just wanted to pass along, you'll notice that there are 4 of us up here. Commissioner Littleton is not here today. It's not because she doesn't want to hear what y'all have to say about this subject. It's just simply that she had a death in the family and couldn't be here. So that's why she's not here, and pass on some nice thoughts to her if you could. I'm Mark Waller. I represent northeastern El Paso County and Colorado Springs, Commissioner District 2. Here's why we're here today. We have a significant need in our community, and that is getting this highway built. This is a serious public safety issue, and it's also a serious economic issue. Think about this. Over a 4-year period recently, 5,700 accidents in the gap section, resulting in 1,300 injuries and 13 deaths, to include 2 state troopers. We have got to do something. We've got to get this project completed, and we have to get the project moving forward. So, just like all my colleagues here, I want to hear your ideas. I want to hear what you have to say. I think that's crucially and incredibly important, that not only do we get this done, but we get it done correctly. I think that's the thing that we all want to do. We want to get this thing done correctly, but we want to get it done. So as we're having this discussion today, I'd ask you just to keep that in the frame of your mind. Doing nothing is not an option here. We have to get this project built. I think we're going to have a lot of good ideas that come out of this, but at the end of the day, we got to get it done because it's a serious public safety issue. So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to do a brief presentation from CDOT, or the Colorado Department of Transportation. In fact, we have Mike Lewis here. He is their the director of CDOT, all of CDOT, the head guy in charge. So he's the guy we can throw all the darts at. No, I'm only kidding. That's just a joke. It's just a joke. So you know, Mike obviously understands how important this is, and is spending his Saturday here to help us get through this and come up with some better ideas and solutions on how we can make this project work moving forward. But then after that, and this is going to be a brief presentation, after that, what we're going to do is we're going to start taking questions. But here's a couple of little ground rules for you. So what we're doing is we're recording this, and we're going to be able to put it out on the county website for everybody to see after this is done, because there are a lot of people that live in this community that aren't here today. And so in order for us to do that and do that well, we need you to come to these microphones to ask the questions. That way, all of the questions are recorded, and then people that are watching it online later can see it. The other thing I want to make sure of is that we give everybody an opportunity to ask their questions. So perhaps if you've asked a question, kind of give other folks an opportunity to get in and have their question asked or their comment heard before you come back up to the microphone, because we want to make sure we're able to accommodate everybody. You know, the high school has been gracious enough to lend us this facility. We've only got it for about an hour and a half, so let's make sure we give everybody an opportunity to be heard. And so with that, I'm done talking. I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he's going to give his presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner, and all the commissioners for inviting us down here. And thank you all to all of you for taking your Saturday morning to come out and talk about the project. It's important to us to continue to hear from residents what their concerns are, you know, on anything having to do with the project. Again, I'm Michael Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of CDOT. There are a number of CDOT staff folks here, and I just want to introduce a couple of them because they're important to this project. First of all is Karen Rowe. Karen is our Region 2 Director. So Karen is responsible for everything that happens in CDOT, from Monument south to New Mexico and east to Kansas, west all the way up to Fairplay. So Karen's responsible for a very big portion of this part of the state, including El Paso County, the Springs, Pueblo. John Hall is our project engineer who is responsible for delivering this project. And so John, some of you may have been to some of our public sessions. You would have seen both Karen and John at each of those sessions. John has made most of the presentations, and when we have specific questions on the project, the whys, the wherefores, the options, John will be able to answer. If I can't answer the questions, if Karen can't answer the questions, John will be able to answer those questions. If we can't answer a question today, we'll be sure we get back to you on it. So with that, I am going to keep it brief, and feel free to get the hook and pull me off if I'm.
Don't you worry, I will.
If I'm droning on a little bit. I want to give you I'm going to get into the project, what it's about, but I want to give you a little bit of background because I know there are a lot of questions about, you know, why can't this project be funded? You know, why can't 4 lanes be built? Why is it taking so long to do this? And so I'm going to get a little bit of background on how CDOT funds projects. And I see Norm Steen here from Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. I always struggle with that one, Norm. And Teller County. And you know, and I'll get into a little bit about how funds are distributed to the needs all across the state. So first, here's a little bit of background. This is how many of you have lived in this area for more than 20 years? Okay, you know this problem. It's growth, it's population increase. In 1991, there were 3.3 million people in Colorado. Today, or roughly today, 2 million more people have come since the early 90s. The challenge is, in the next 20 years, we're going to get another 2 million people. And 80% of that growth is going to be in the Front Range. It's going to be between the Springs and Fort Collins. And so the I-25 corridor is critical to absorbing that growth. So that's why not only is it a problem today, this I-25 gap, it's going to be a bigger problem in the future. And it's just on the capacity issue. Now, a little bit about funding. We looked at, and this is what we do with our planning partners all across the state, is we look at what the needs are to the future. So on a 20-year horizon, 20-plus year horizon, we do a long-range planning study and say, what are the needs across the state because of growth, because of safety, because of infrastructure deterioration? We expect, under the current funding structure, to take in about call it $20 billion in revenues over the next, up through 2040. The needs that have been identified by all the local communities, all the regional planning agencies, all the metropolitan planning organizations, is the need is about $46 billion. So it's about $1 billion a year short in what we take in and what we can use to what the identified need is. So there's a significant gap. I'll use that term gap several times today. There's a gap in terms of revenues versus needs. So here's how we currently spend funds within CDOT. And it's a little bit small, but I'll describe it, and we'll make this available to all of you so everybody that wants this presentation can have it and see it in more detail. Most of where the money goes today, that goes to CDOT, and our annual budget is approximately $1.5 billion. Most of that goes to maintaining the existing infrastructure. That's maintaining the pavement, maintaining the bridges, maintaining the culverts, maintaining the guardrails, cutting the grass, plowing snow. That's what we spend our money on. So roughly $800 million of our current revenue goes to maintaining what we have. Now, we assess all of our existing infrastructure, our assets, and even to maintain the level of quality that we have today, and some of you will probably say, some of that's not so good. To maintain what we have today, at the level that we have today, we are $200 million a year short, just maintaining what we have today. So in our current funding structure, if we continue to spend $800 million a year just on maintenance, all of our assets are going to deteriorate over time. They're going to get worse. Pavement will get worse, the bridges will get worse, culverts will get worse, and that's based on our funding structure. But there are other funds. The next highest column, that orange column, is pass-through funds. That's money that comes into CDOT and immediately goes out to local governments for their use on their priority projects. So those are pass-through grants that go to local agencies, local governments for their use. We have no say in how that money is used. The next one is maximizing what we have. So of the existing infrastructure that we have, how do we get the most out of it? We use technology. We use ramp metering. We use connected traffic signals. It's getting more flow out of the existing facilities that we have without adding pavement. So that's going to be something that we're going to continue to use in the future, and probably more need to be more efficient in getting traffic flowing within the existing footprint that we have. Then the next orange one is program delivery. That's the oversight. That's the engineering. That's how do we get projects delivered that needs administration. We have to make sure the contractors are doing what they are contracted to do. Then we have contingency funds in the gray. And then the last one, that's increased capacity. That's how much we're currently spending a year on increasing capacity. So the GAP project is an increased capacity project. And we just don't have, in that model, we don't have the revenues to increase capacity where the needs are identified all around the state. Predominantly capacity increase needed on the Front Range, but not solely. So, Aaron. So the GAP, what is the GAP project? It is an 18-mile segment from right about here, Monument, north to Castle Rock. It's the section of I-25 that was it hasn't been upgraded since the early 1960s when it was built. You've resurfaced it, you've probably fixed the guardrail, but the capacity has not been changed since it was originally built and I think completed in 1962. So it's a 2-lane rural interstate highway for 18-mile segment. And when it was built, it's exactly what it was, a rural interstate highway. Any of you here in 1962? Any of you, were you here when the highway was built? What was it like around here from a population perspective? Wasn't population, right? So at the time that it was planned and built, it served its purpose. It was a rural highway. It was like segments of I-25 south towards New Mexico. That's what it was like. Times have changed, and they'll continue to change. Next, why are we doing this? I mean, the commissioners identified this. There are two principal issues here. The first and foremost is safety. The number of crashes, and you've all experienced this, hopefully not personally, the number of crashes that have occurred in this segment of highway is very high. What is it, 1,800 crashes in 5 years? Of those, over 600 personal injury crashes, 5 fatalities a year. I mean, if you break that down to on an annual basis, it's more than 100 personal injury crashes a year. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in terms of timing, why this is important to act now, and I think the commissioners have identified that as well. The next is the obvious one too, is capacity. How many of you that are traveling between Monument or the Springs and Denver have been frustrated because you get on the highway and you're going along at 75 miles an hour, all of a sudden you're down to 10. That's a capacity issue. That's because you get to the point of volume of flow, and this is not just like Monday morning and Wednesday evening. It's like almost every day, and it's very high on weekends, and you all know that. The highest volume on this segment of highway isn't the traditional Monday through Friday, which is typical in an urban area. The highest volume is Thursday through Sunday. So the weekends are as bad as weekdays. So it's an everyday problem. Now the other thing is reliability. If you go to Denver at 10 at night, chances are you got no problem. It's a very predictable ride. But it's getting worse throughout the day that you don't know how long it's going to take you to make the trip one way or the other. It could be great, it could be terrible. And that is affected by, is there a breakdown? Is there some bad weather? Is it a slow truck? Is it a crazy driver weaving in and out of the lanes? Any one of those things, when you get past the saturation level, that's too many vehicles than the highway can handle, it just breaks down, and you don't have reliable flow. So that's why we need to do this. And the other thing, there are no options. If you're up in the Denver metro area and you're on 25 and you can't get anywhere, maybe I'll take E470, maybe I'll take C470, maybe I'll take Santa Fe, maybe I'll take 225, maybe I'll go somewhere, maybe I'll get on the local roads. There are no options here. And that's not a bad thing, but there are no options to bail off of it. You can't read this because it's too small, but this gets into why are we suggesting an express toll lane. And I think that's probably the most controversial thing about this proposal, and probably what a lot of the questions are going to be today. But let me just introduce why, and why we're doing this virtually everywhere on the highway system where we are trying to add capacity. It's because we can gain reliability for longer in time. So what the two columns on the left are the existing conditions. This is 2 lanes in each direction. Green is good, red is bad, yellow and orange are somewhere in between. So this is a relative chart. This is just relative, what's good, what's bad. Now today, this represents average peak flow. So not the worst of the worst, but it's your average, Monday morning commute or, something like that. So today, or when the project is predicted to open, that the first year up there says 2021, it says that the average peak travel, the speed is 52 miles an hour. Now, how many of you, at a peak period right now, say, I'm not going 52 miles an hour, I'm at 0, right? Or maybe I'm at 65, but it says it's an average 52. So in relative terms, that yellow in the upper left, compare the future to that. If you think that underestimates the congestion, think about that in the future as well. The next 3 columns are what would happen if we added a general purpose lane in each direction. So instead of 2 lanes in each direction, we add a 3rd lane. No question, it gets better immediately. So it goes green. Early on, and when we open the project, it's green, which means it's good. You get good flow in both directions. But in a relatively short period of time, it degrades again. Because remember, that population has continued to grow, and instead of just getting squeezed into 2 lanes, you're going to be squeezed into 3 lanes. And you'll see the degradation in 3 general purpose lanes, and it gets worse over time. The next 3 columns are 2 general purpose lanes plus an express lane. And you'll see that early on, you know, things are good. What the benefit of an express lane is it gives you more time of reliability. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail later. But that's the concept. That's a general chart, comparative chart, but that's the concept. It gives you more time to the future where you can get that reliability between where you are here and where you want to go. Next, Ron. So this is what it looks like. This is what the proposed plan looks like. The existing conditions, 2 lanes in each direction with relatively narrow shoulders. And the shoulders are very important. That's what there's the real safety issue on those shoulders. And what happens when either there's a breakdown or a crash, if there isn't room to move a car or a truck adequately off the roadway, it affects not only the safety of the people in that disabled vehicle or the people that are trying to fix the disabled vehicle, changing a tire, you know, getting it hooked up to a tow truck, first responders there, or you've pulled somebody over for speeding and the state patrol is there. You need the room, adequate room, to keep traffic flowing on the lanes and not affect the safety of the people that are needing a breakdown lane. So the proposed action has widened shoulders both inside and outside. And that not only is a critical safety improvement, it also helps with the capacity because it takes that friction out of the roadway so the lanes can keep moving. Now, go back to that one. And then we add the 3rd lane in each direction, so that would be the inside lane closest to the median barrier. That's the express lane. And there's a 4-foot barrier. It's not a barrier, there's a 4-foot separation between the express lane and the general purpose lanes. That's the design. And this is what it looks in more detail. The 2 general purpose lanes will always stay free. Those are free lanes, choice lanes. You don't have to use the toll lane. You don't have to use the express lane. Continue to use the general purpose lanes. If you have a commitment, you need to be somewhere, it is your choice to use the express lane, get in it, pay a toll, and have that travel time reliability into the future. Next. So and this goes into, again, why are we talking about express lanes? This is a photo just from the Denver metro area, but the T-Rex project was done about 15 years ago, and it was a great project, very expensive project. It added capacity on I-25, it added extra lanes on I-25 through the downtown, and for the first few years it worked great. But it is right now, it's clogged up. It is filled up, and there's nothing we can do about that because we don't have any ability to manage who uses what lane. Everybody will just use whatever lane they can, and that gets you the same congestion that you had in the previous number of lanes, but you just have more volume using it. So you have no way of managing that. So I-25 through Denver, any peak flow, morning, night, is jammed up. You don't have that reliability to travel. Next. Now, there's a question of why are we doing it here? Why Monument? Why El Paso County? Why Douglas County? In fact, since 2013, we have been looking at any time we're adding capacity to the interstate, we look at is an express lane a viable option? Is that the better option for the future? So, in fact, the light blue on this map are the express lanes that we have already implemented or are under construction. So US 36, the diagonal that goes up towards Boulder, that opened up a couple of years ago as an express lane design. I-70 in the Mountain Corner eastbound, that opened up in 2016. We're currently on the same trajectory as the GAP project to get a westbound express lane in the same location. Hopefully we can get under construction this year. We have C470 between Wadsworth and I-25 under construction right now with an express lane. Central 70, the big project between I-25 and Chambers Road out to the airport, 10 miles, Under construction this summer, express lanes. I-25 north, all the way up to Fort Collins in segments. There are 8 individual segments under construction with express lanes. So the most recent one that was awarded this year, awarded to construction, is the segment, we call it segment 7 and 8, that's from Greeley up to Fort Collins. Widened shoulders, express lanes, and that's to manage that growth. That segment is almost a mirror image of the gap in terms of population increase, capacity constraints, and future growth, which is what expected to come. Next. This is the US 36 cross-section. Very similar to what we're proposing for the gap, in that there's on the far left is the express lane. That's a Flatiron Flyer bus driving in it. There's a 4-foot gap between those white lines that separates the express lane, not a physical barrier, but that separates from the general purpose lanes. The third lane on the other side is an auxiliary lane. That's just an on-ramp to an off-ramp. So that's not a consistent cross-section throughout. And what the US 36 has experienced is almost a 30% improvement in travel time prior to its construction. So going from 2 lanes in each direction to the 2+ express lane is a 30% improvement in travel time. Next. Mountain corridor is similar. This is a little bit different because it actually is very constrained physically. So it's a part-time express lane. Most of the time it's just still a shoulder, but for 100 days a year, for specific periods of time, we open it up to travel. And when it's open to travel, you get about a 50% increase in travel time. A lot of questions on how much would the tolls be. That hasn't been established yet, but here's what current tolls are in several of the systems that we already have in place. So on US 36, the fees, it's a 17-mile segment, it's roughly comparable. The low rate is $2.45, the high rate is $5.15. I-25, the low rate is 35 cents, the high rate is $5, and I-25 from US 36 to 120th, so it's that dense development just north of the city, and that is a low fee of $1 with a high fee of $3. That's a relative comparison. It's all public information. That's what is being charged on some of these express lanes right now that are in operation. That gives you a sense of what the rates would be. What this is not, and I think there have been some misunderstanding about this. We are not building a toll road. This is not I-25 is all a toll road. The 2 lanes in each direction will remain free general purpose lanes just as they are today. To use an express lane is a choice. You can choose it. You can choose it every day. You can never use it. You can use it only when you have a need to arrive somewhere in a specified period of time. There's a lot of concern about, this is only for the wealthy. That's not how it turns out. People use the lane based on need, and they make an individual choice. That is up to the individual driver. And it is not privately owned. We're not selling the roadway to an international firm that collects tolls for profit. This is CDOT's roadway. So CDOT owns the roadway. CDOT will operate the roadway. There's a branch of CDOT called HPTE. It's the High Performance Transportation Enterprise. It was established by the legislature 8 years ago. They are our toll entity. So they will operate the roadway, collect the revenues, and they will invest the revenues back into the maintenance and operations of that roadway. So the project itself, we have established a $350 million budget for the project, and that the vast majority, the $250 million of that, is money that the Transportation Commission has said we can put that money, we will pledge that money towards the roadway, and that money comes from Senate Bill 267, which was passed last year. Prior to Senate Bill 267 passed, there was no money. That 250 didn't exist. So it's very important that that Senate Bill 267 money actually becomes available, and it can't become available until July 1st because the Treasurer has to issue bonds to give that money to us. I'll skip over the orange slice for a minute. But the others, the balance comes from local communities. Douglas County, El Paso County have agreed to contribute up to these amounts, as well as the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority. I stumble with that one, I'm afraid. But they make up a total of 35 million of those three, 35 million towards the project. The orange slice is an anticipation, a hope, a wish to get a $65 million grant from the federal U.S. Department of Transportation. El Paso County worked with us to submit a grant to the federal government for investment in this project. We won't know until sometime later in the spring whether we're successful with that grant. And I will tell you, I've used this before, is that the chances of being successful with a grant in this is about equivalent to getting into Harvard. It is a very, very competitive grant program where you have about, they have about 10% of the funds compared to states and localities that actually submit applications. So if they have $600 million available, chances are they had $6 billion in applications. So it's a really tough competitive grant. If we aren't successful with the orange slice, we're going to have to get back together, figure out how we make this happen. If we are successful, if this holds, we can get under construction this year. That's why John's on the project. We can get it, no pressure, but we can get under construction this year, which is really important when we talk about that safety issue. So with that, we can talk about the next steps. We can do that in the Q&A, but we're going to complete our environmental process this spring. With the anticipated completion of the environmental process, funds available, we can get under construction this year.
All right, with that, questions and comments. So please, from the microphones, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphones, we can just stage there and we'll go from there.
Beginning your presentation that you're going to address why you can't have 4 lanes in each direction.
Sure. There's both a why we can't and perhaps why we shouldn't. Those are two different answers. Aaron, can you go to the next slide? Okay, there are two answers to this. One is, the first is how do you compare the needs all across the state? So we all recognize the GAP project is a needed investment. There are many, many other identified needed investments across the state. This is actual list of projects that totals over $6 billion. These are the priority projects that have been identified, not just by PPACG, but by the other metropolitan planning organizations, by the other regional transportation agencies, that these are the projects identified as priorities all across the state. It's over $6 billion. And that's a subset of what we've actually identified, which is a backlog of more than 10 billion identified projects. So there's an issue of how do we take, when we say we only have 100 million a year to spend on capacity improvements all across the state, that's the challenge. So we have to balance that, not only where the needs are, but how do we put the money where it is most important? So we could build, if funding was not an issue, we could build 4 lanes today in each direction. But relative to where the other needs are, 4 lanes are not needed now. They may very well be needed in the future. They very likely will be needed in the future, but that could be 20, 25, or 30 years into the future. What we're doing is we're ensuring that whatever of a bridge crossing, either over or under, we're widening it to ensure that it has the room to put the 4th lane in the future when it is needed and when the funds are available. So there isn't a need today, there very likely will be in the future, but how do we spend the very limited resources we have on all of the needs across the state, and that's reflected in the blue on that map.
Hi, I have a non-express lane question, which might be unusual. Over the last 2 or 3 years, one of the biggest problems in the existing GAP traffic has been the segment from Toma Road to Plum Creek Parkway, where maybe 10% of all the traffic at busy times uses the western frontage road, and that represents a real danger to bicyclists and to people using the Dawson Butte and Greenland open space. And I'm wondering, if construction begins and you start diverting traffic, particularly over to that western frontage road, what kind of safety management procedures will be in place for that?
I'm going to start the question. I'm going to ask John to supplement that because he has more knowledge. First of all, during construction, we will maintain the 2 lanes of traffic at all times. So there will never be a reduction in capacity compared to what you have today throughout the construction. That's one of the reasons that, the way John and the contractor and designers are planning it is to ensure that doesn't happen. We also have some opportunities to address some of the frontage road issues while we do that.
So that stretch is also tentatively being looked at as a package one, a first package. So as Mike said, again, we're going to maintain two lanes during construction at all times. And that probably is the priority package, to get that done and get that opened up so we can relieve that issue that you're talking about. We're certainly not going to divert and intentionally, push more traffic onto that because that is one of the most detrimental impacts to our highway operation right now too. Coming home yesterday on a Friday afternoon, you see it, that 5-mile stretch is backed up because of that movement. So we're going to try to prevent that and get that relieved as quick as possible.
Ann, go ahead.
Just a couple of questions. I noticed that you said that this is a choice. If the lane goes in as general purpose, you can never make it a toll road, correct?
That's correct.
I also think...
So can I just, Ann, for the folks that may be less familiar than you, there's the current federal law, this is not a regulation, this is actually statute in federal regulations. We cannot turn a free lane into a toll lane anywhere in the country. So if it was built as a free interstate highway, this is on the interstate, if it was built as a free interstate highway, it can't be converted to a toll lane. So the additional lane can be tolled. The existing lanes cannot be tolled. So if we built it as a free lane, we couldn't come back in the future and toll it.
And you said that the 4th lane is not necessarily needed, but could we go back to your capacity slide?
Sure.
Yellow, green, orange.
Yep.
That kind of shows that it is needed. It will be needed in the near term future, and that the toll lane versus the the 3 general purpose lane doesn't really gain you that much other than maybe a year capacity. And if you could see the figures, there's only, I believe you have miles per hour, correct?
Yep, that's right.
So it's only a couple of miles per hour difference there, correct?
I think let's just talk in relative terms. And again, this is compared to that upper left yellow, which is today's conditions. So if you sort of think about in terms of today's conditions, if that yellow is bad and the orange is therefore worse and the red is much worse, that's the same relative each of the columns. So what we would say, and this is not, I'll just be very candid, this is not a slam dunk, right? Because 3 lanes general purpose will work well in the early years of construction or operations. It will, no question about it. As time goes on, as population increases, it will become less good compared to having the express lane. And so that on the far right 3 columns, you can see it starts out green and then it goes to yellow and then it stays yellow further, in like a decade in, compared to the orange in the 3 general purpose lanes. That's what we're buying. Now, I'll just say, and I'll get back to you, it is very hard to come up with the funds to do this level of project today. But for Senate Bill 267 passing, we wouldn't be here today because there wasn't an identified funding source to do even this project. It just wasn't there. 10 years from now, I don't know what the funding issues are going to be. So I think it's very difficult to predict that, in the future, are we going to have those funds?
So to that point, this is a non-Tabor, if you will, tax on people. The money is supposed to come from the state and federal highway, and instead you're asking folks to pay for it. The other thing is that only about less than 2 miles is in El Paso County, so only the money raised in El Paso can be used in El Paso. So basically, people who want to get to Denver are going to be told, because it's not going to be the people closer to Denver. So El Paso County residents will pay, I would think, more of a share to get to Denver if they want those reliable trips, which, in my opinion, CDOT is charged with making it a reliable, safe trip for all Coloradoans, not just the 10%, which I think is your projected numbers, who will use those toll roads. So the question is, when did CDOT's thinking change that you weren't supposed to provide that for all Coloradoans, only 10% who want to pay this extra fee? Why not go to the state legislature and the governor and ask for those? I understand it's a difficult thing, but now you're coming to the citizens and you're asking them to pay instead of the right funding source, which is the state and federal government. Thank you.
Thanks, and let me try to unpack a little bit of that. I think there was a lot in what Ann had to say, and I know you've been in the state legislature before. You were in the New Hampshire legislature for a short time, I understand, so you know how a lot of this works. You know, the state legislature isn't, CDOT doesn't get to drive policy at the state legislature. The El Paso County doesn't get to drive policy at the state legislature. In fact, a lot of the state legislators are hamstrung in numerous ways in which they can drive policy at the state legislature. In fact, I encourage you to talk to, we got a couple of state representatives back here, Paul Lundeen and Shane Sandridge, visit with them after, and they can tell you about what's happening in the state legislature right now. They're working on a proposal to raise about $3.5 billion in transportation spending for the state of Colorado. That might get us to the point where we can get to that 4th lane. That's my goal. That's what I want to see happen. But, you know, Paul and Shane are only 2 out of 100 people there. And so, you know, we don't always just get our way. That's not how things work in state government. So we're working really hard to come up with transportation funding solutions, and I think that we would tell you, yeah, there is money there. It just becomes a circumstance about how we decide to prioritize it in the state of Colorado, and I think both Paul and Shane would tell you they want to prioritize transportation spending over a lot of other things that get prioritized. Do you guys get to do that every time?
No, but I always said 2 roads and bridges before transportation.
Sure. So we are working on that, but it is a, you know, we don't live in a vacuum here. We don't get to dictate and drive policy ourselves. The best we can do is work within the structure that we have and make sure we're trying to push and promote that good public policy moving forward. I think Mike could tell you, if he had every dollar that he wanted to build roads in Colorado, we'd have 4 lanes, no problem. But he's subject to what the state legislature does. He's subject to what happens there. The other thing I want to kind of unpack from this, you'd referred to this as a federal program and a federal highway, and it is. It absolutely is a federal highway. But I don't know if any of you have recently looked at the Trump transportation infrastructure package that he just put out, the proposal for a transportation infrastructure package that he just put out. But effectively that says, look, federal government is, you know, bankrupt. It doesn't have the money it needs. And so the way they're going to prioritize transportation moving forward is they're going to kick in about maybe 20% of the proceeds necessary to build the highway. In this circumstance, I think it's about 18.5% that we're asking for from the federal government. And state and local governments, you're going to have to rely on yourselves in order to come up with the rest of the funding. I don't like that, but it's the reality that we live in, because as an El Paso County Commissioner, I don't get to tell the federal government what to do any more than I get to tell the state legislature what to do. And so these are the confines, these are the rules that have been defined for us, and so we're trying to work within those confines to get this done. One of the things I think Mike didn't say in terms of what makes us a little bit more competitive for this federal money coming down is, you know, we have an administration that wants to get stuff done and wants to get stuff done now. One of the things that makes us incredibly competitive for this project, we're ready to go. It's not, we're telling people we're shovel ready and we're going to be shovel ready 2 years from now. I am absolutely confident we're going to break ground on this project sometime this year. I think that makes us incredibly competitive moving forward. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to this?
Well, I just thank you, Commissioner Waller. Just a quick comment, and my apologies, because really this is supposed to be for citizens to be asking questions. But many of us might not know that the current proposed concept here for that managed lane, the toll lane, is that it's both HOV and toll. So it's HOV3, and my understanding about what that means is if there's 3 people in the car, you can use the toll lane but not pay a toll. So one of the things that I have just very recently asked CDOT to do, because there are different ways to manage a lane, and I think some of our objections in our community is about paying for use of that lane, but there are other ways to manage the lane. HOV is one of those ways, right? So I'm interested in asking CDOT, the possibility of an HOV lane that is not tolled. And then the other question is the value between an HOV2 and an HOV3, and possibly an HOV2 with a toll. But all of these, I think, are other kinds of design considerations that I think are well worth getting a good understanding from CDOT about which of those might work best for us. Now, having said that, and one last thing, I do appreciate CDOT coming down here and standing in front of you and taking your questions. So I just want to express my appreciation for that.
Can we get back to...
Okay, thank you. My name is Mike Girth. I've been in the area since 1960. 25 years of my career has required me to commute to Denver. I've probably got 300,000 miles on that road out there. So that makes me a bit of an expert. I've often thought this road could easily be 3 lanes by taking mostly from the inside shoulder and stealing from the outside where necessary. Now there's a few places there where the road pinches down, you'd probably have to do something different. I contend you could make that 3 lanes right now, drop the speed limit to 65 miles an hour, get trucks out there to quickly remove stalls. Enforcement, no, we don't want troopers stopping on that road. We need to have something to identify lawbreakers, that they can be picked up by their license number. But by lowering the speed, some people can't drive that road 75 miles an hour. We see that all the time at Greenland and the toll maxers. There's a curve there. People crash all the time. I contend by dropping it to 65, which will only take 5 more minutes to get to Castle Rock. And in Castle Rock, where it goes to 3 lanes, the speed limit drops to 65. So I see where you're talking in the future. Yes, we need a plan for the future, but we need a solution right now. We'll worry about the future then, because there's no money for the future anyway. We can make this 3 lanes now, take off the median. Then also past Toma, where we put the corral cables on the outside, there's 2 frontage roads. Why can't we have simple turnoffs, escapes, that when it does back up, at least some movement can escape to the frontage road?
There are a number of suggestions in there. Let me address them, and I want John to help me with this. First of all, speed limits a little bit. How many of you don't have to raise your hand. How many of you drive only 75 on that stretch of road?
Nope, not me.
We came down this morning, and I had my cruise control set at 75 just to observe. I was segment to that, I'm one of the slowest vehicles out there. So speed limit signs without enforcement have almost 0 effect on travel. Travel is people will drive what they feel comfortable driving. Some don't feel comfortable at all driving 75. Some are perfectly happy at 85. And that's one of the danger issues here, is you get differentials in speed. So just lowering a speed limit will have 0 effect. What it may do is actually broaden the speed differential, which may make it more hazardous. The other thing is on the existing pavement, we could restripe that right now at 3 lanes in each direction and have virtually no shoulders. So the safety issue that is important to all of us would get worse. Speeds would increase because you have more room and there's no protection for disabled vehicles or first responders or anybody else. So I couldn't in good conscience do that. And so that's why we're moving forward with the project we have. With regard to the jump-offs, that's a hazard in itself, because if people have an opportunity to jump from the interstate to a frontage road because there's congestion, that move is going to be a hazard in itself. And then there's the impact on the frontage roads. So I hear where you're coming from, and I do recognize that after 30 years of driving that road, you know what you're talking about.
And that's with no accidents, no tickets. Now, I realize that.
We need you as an educator.
Well, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to go off on the funding, so if you got something else to say about what I just said.
I just wanted to say that I think the way we're scoping the project is pretty much exactly as you stated. We are going to widen to the center. We are trying to make this project as fast as is possibly doable with following the federal regulations on environmental assessments, NEPA studies, and all this stuff. But our intent is to do exactly that. And what you're proposing allows us to fast track the project, those exact things, because we're not going to significantly widen. There's still going to be a chunk, 10 feet plus of widening, but not a major widening of the outside that would then require right-of-way and impacting wildlife conservation easements and stuff like that. So I think we're doing exactly what you're proposing in many ways.
I have a question on
Go ahead.
on funding. From what I've heard,
if you could let everybody go through, not all, with all due respect, because I want to be mindful of everybody here.
okay, I'll get back up then.
Can you hear me okay? I'm Dan Rivers, I live in Kingsteer, and Mike, thank you very much for arranging all this and you guys coming out and taking questions. We appreciate it. A lot of us are interested in this project. Just like to ask one question regarding that chart you showed with those columns. You made a very interesting comment that if we had 3 general purpose lanes in each direction, that would be okay for several years, but then we'd have to go to 4. But you also said that you're making this wide enough so this could be widened to 4 in the future. There are a lot of us, when we hear toll lanes, HOV 2, HOV 3, we just see it as the state doing social engineering on us, and some of us don't like it. We like free lanes. So I would like to ask, why don't you just build it with 4 lanes in each direction? And if you can't afford that right now, why don't you show us the 4th column, what that would look like if we had 4 columns? We have 8 lanes from Denver to Castle Rock. And I don't understand why we can't put 8 lanes in from Castle Rock down here. As far as the government being broke, they ain't. They can print as much as they like. This is a matter of will.
Thank you. We can create, go back to that, Aaron, to the chart. Yeah. We can create a comparison chart, with another column that shows 4 general purpose lanes. I will guarantee you it will be green for several years to come. It will show green, no question about it. The issue is, from here south, what is it, John, 25 miles? It's 3 lanes in each direction. So and make that 4 as well, right? So there's the challenge, because it isn't just this stretch. If you go, Aaron, can you go to the map of all the express lanes? And I'll quickly end this. There are so many. I-25 from here all the way to Fort Collins has that demand. There's the improvements, programmed improvements from Denver to Fort Collins is $1.7 billion to go to that capacity. We don't have the funds to do that. That's why we're going with the express lanes. C-470 between 25 and I-70, that needs a widened capacity as well. 25 through downtown, I don't think you can do it. There's just no physical space to do it. But if we built more lanes, it would flow better, there's no question about it. So it does come down to, are the funds available, and how do you prioritize them against all the needs around the state?
Sir?
Justin, I know you're leaving the way station out of this project, but my suggestion is you start the toll road at Palmer Divide at the top of the hill, and you use the 25 million you're getting from El Paso County to move the way stations up to the old rest stations. The reason being, and you keep it out of this project, you build it as a separate project. One, you get rid of all the environmental impacts that go on up the hill. Two, you get rid of the safety problem of dropping the one lane that happens out there. And three, you get rid of the problem of the trucks starting from a dead stop to go up the hill. So use the El Paso County money, which is supposed to be spent in El Paso County, to move the way stations. I think you could probably do it for 25 million. Get them all moved up and start the project at the top of the hill.
I think the best way I can address it is to say, I mean, those are great suggestions. Moving that way station is something that's going to be looked at in the planning environmental linkage study. I don't know that we can just leave 25 million on the table, and use it for something else, but we would love to see some funding for that, and totally agree with you.
I think you've got a problem. You have $25 million in this thing. It's supposed to be spent in El Paso County.
Yeah.
There isn't $25 million worth of work out there unless you build all kinds of noise walls that I've heard you're thinking about doing for the trailer park, which would probably be cheaper to buy the trailer park than build the walls. But the point is, if you start your project at the top of the hill, you use the 25 as an early action project, even if you don't get the rest of the funding, you would improve safety fairly significantly by fixing the problems at the Monument interchange and up.
Yep, thank you.
So,
I think that's right.
$50 million in El Paso County is what's scheduled to be spent here.
He was already posted there.
Thank you. So thanks for coming out. It seems to me that most of this is a sales pitch. It sounds like you guys aren't confident that you're going to get this 65 million in that orange portion there, and you're trying to sell us on the idea of a toll road. You call it an express lane, but it's a toll road. So let's say it goes to that extent. Well, first question is, if we don't get that 65 million, if we don't get into Harvard, is this going to happen?
Aaron, can you go back to the pie chart? So the tolls, the tolls are not going to the construction. Okay, so the collection of the tolls on the express lane are irrelevant relative to our ability to build it. So, it's not about we need the tolls to build the project, because nowhere in that pie chart is revenue from tolls. The tolls are, they will contribute to the operations, the maintenance of it going forward, which is a good thing, because again, we're 200 million short, and so anyway, the tolls are about managing flow. We're very open about that. It is to provide reliability into the future. We can have a disagreement, that's fine, we'll talk about that. The chances of getting the orange is tough. I mean, I think we do, as the commissioner pointed out, I think we have a very good pitch. We have a very good argument. We're ready to go. We'll line up bulldozers out there to show the feds we're ready to go. You give us the funds and we'll go. If the orange doesn't come to fruition, it doesn't mean the project goes away. It means that we all have to get together. I have to get together with the Transportation Commission, maybe members of the Assembly. How do we fill that gap? Because I'm going to continue to advocate for this project. This is one of the critical projects we have in our system. And I just go back to the safety. If we delay a year, we're going to have that many more crashes, that many more personal injuries, and God forbid, that many more fatalities. So I'm going to continue to push for it.
I'll just add, and my life will get a lot more stressful, but I'll be working hard to try to see what minor elements we can eliminate and keep the project on track and under construction. Right?
Okay. And I'd add to this too, I might be a little biased here, but I don't think it's one of the most important transportation projects. I think it's the most important transportation project in the state of Colorado right now. In 20 years, Colorado Springs is going to be the largest city in the entire state. We need to have that transportation infrastructure necessary to connect people between Denver and Colorado Springs. Sir?
Thanks. I'm Chris Sorensen. I live in Walden, just east of here, about 6 miles. A couple of questions. One is, that's a great one, is why the hell do we have a weigh station in the first place? But aside from that, really my
Mike, you can answer that one.
No, I don't want to put that in the question. It's a great one to ponder. But why does it cost $350 million for 18 miles? I can't accept that. I just doing the rough math, and you start breaking it down, it gives you about $19 million to do a mile. I mean, if we had to buy the land, I could get it. But as a citizen, I wonder, are we really questioning the cost of building the roads and the margins that the contractors, construction folks are actually getting? Okay. So that's the big one. And the other one is, if we do put an express toll in and use that to manage traffic, is there a horizon on the toll? When I drive C470, that's been tolled for a long time. Do these tolls ever stop? Mm-hmm. Do we ever see a time horizon end on that, a sunset? That's it.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to ask John to talk about the why is it $350 million. I'll touch on it briefly. And I'll just be very candid with you. It would not be our intention to remove the tolls because those tolls aren't being there in order to pay for the project. They're there to help manage that reliability going forward. So it's actually somebody said social engineering. It's a way of managing traffic. We either like that or we don't like that, but that's why we're very candid about it. That's why it's there. E470, which is a toll highway, their revenue for their expansion, all their operations comes from their tolls. It is it is a toll road. You use that road, you know you're paying a toll. Their tolls go for the maintenance and the expansion in the future. Why is it 350? Let me just talk about, of the 350, we have to design it, we have to oversee it, so there's a piece of that in the 350. The rest, it's a low bid proposition. That's how we do our projects. This is the private sector. There's a sort of misnomer that we're getting into public-private partnerships. For 100 years we've been public-private partnerships. We put our work out to competitive bids for the contractors in Colorado, and they price it based on their labor rates and the cost of materials. And so we're going to go with, this one was a best value selection, but this is what the cost. And their margins, construction industry margins, are not high. Most people tell you they'd be much better off putting their money in the stock market instead of investing in their company. But, John.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, the $350 million is not, is a planning estimate that we're trying to be responsible. CDOT's over the last decade done a lot of research, our project management office, into how we estimate projects. And I can go over with you afterwards some of the bottom line is the pure pavement and bridges and major structures like walls in order to keep this project in right of way are about $150 million. Those are easy to itemize. And we have historical data that basically says, then you take that and you about 2 to 2.5 times, and this is 10 years of every project we've ever done. So that's the planning level, but we're going to have a much more detailed by-line independent cost estimate when we actually spend any taxpayer dollars on it.
Sir?
Yes, my name's Justin Peterson. I grew up here. And you've got 2 ways you can go. I mean, yeah, putting another lane in, that's great. But you've also got 83 that you could widen, because when I was growing up as a kid, you go through 83 up to Parker, you blinked, you didn't see Parker. Now it's 3 lanes each way in Parker. And my other question is, we pay a gas tax. All these cars are paying a gas tax, and they've got license plate fees, which were doubled by, I think it was Romer, quite a few years back. Where's all that money going?
So on the 83 question, there are two different roads, 2 different projects, and this is part of the interstate highway system. This is designed nationally as this is how you travel between large distances, and it will always be the interstate highway. It's not to say that 83 isn't the challenge in the future. This is the challenge we're facing now, so that's what we're focused on it. The gas tax, Aaron, if you can go back to the very first slide, the gas tax goes to what's called the Highway Trust Fund. So the gas tax in Colorado, it is 20 cents a gallon, I think, something like that, 21 cents a gallon. It was last raised in 1991. It goes to Highway Trust Fund. That's the principal source of revenue for transportation improvements. The registration fee is pretty significant. I'm a recent transplant from somewhere that registration fees weren't this high. It was a shock to me when I went to register my car. That goes to transportation as well. All of those funds go to what we currently spend. So if you go to the bar chart, that one, that's where those funds go today. So they go 800 million a year goes to maintaining what we have, and then down the ramp. So that's where it goes today. But it was last indexed in 1991, and it's only about 40% of the buying power because of inflation that it had in 1991.
Well, and on the gas tax, the cost per car has actually gone down, or the amount of revenue generated per car has actually gone down fairly significantly with all of the fuel efficiencies in cars and hybrids and cars that don't use any gas at all. I mean, that's kind of caused that cost per car to go down, or that the revenue generated per car to go down.
You've also got a quantity of cars that's like tripled.
That is true, and all that's taken into account. You have higher volumes, they're getting better mileage, and that separation is continuing to go. But the big one is inflation. It's just 40% of its buying power as it was when it was indexed in 1991.
Sir? He was first. I got this.
My name is Richard Robertson. I've been here 12 years in this county. I've got some points I want to raise. I want to first say that my remarks are made as an individual. They do not represent any organization I may belong to here in the county, and I do belong to several. So you know, my life has been in highways. I have 40 years of professional experience. I'll mention 3 agencies that I was with. The Virginia Department of Highways, where I was the urban transportation engineer. The Appalachian Regional Commission, where I was director of transportation. And finally, the Federal Highway Administration, where I was the associate administrator for policy in Washington. For 60 years, the state of Colorado has concentrated its federal highway funding for the interstate primarily on Interstate 70. This commissioner has nothing to do with it. He's a good man. He came here fairly recently. That is one of the problems. It has been at least 25 years since I believe the state legislature has increased money for highways, the gas tax in particular. That is a disgrace and a failure by the state legislature of this state. The I-25 gap is still, as the commissioner has pointed out, a 4-lane interstate highway for 60 years. That is not a good record. It is primarily because of the use of the money on I-70 that you did get from the Federal Highway Administration in great part. And I worked with the Colorado DOT from Washington for 8 years. It's inexcusable that it's been this late. I would say there is almost no support within the El Paso County citizens. I've been to about 6 different meetings held by the fine staff of the Colorado DOT. They're making a good presentation. They're doing their job. The people here do not want a 3-lane in each direction with an express lane, which in some degree is a toll lane. What they want is one of two things. They either want 3 free lanes in each direction, or they want 3 free lanes and an express lane. They will accept an express lane, but not very easily if you don't have 4 lanes.
All right, can we, sir, we got about 15 minutes left. If you wouldn't mind, if you got a question.
I'll close it out and say that they've said that you need another 100 million. The answer is that you need the state legislature to act and provide additional funds. I suggest the gas tax is the easiest way to go, dedicated solely to highways. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir?
Okay, I kind of tee off of that a little bit. You've already expressed that you're going to be sinking costs into expanding the bridges to handle 4 lanes as it is right now. Okay, so can you address how much additional it would cost to put a 4th lane in? Because it's basically the concrete, you know, and some, you've already got the labor working on the road. There's a lot of costs that would handle that. The other thing that,
go up into the stairs.
as you showed on your chart, this proposal here basically is going to take us from 75 down to 10 to maybe 75 down to 40, which still isn't a great condition. So I'm just thinking that if we put some additional funding in up front here, that 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're not going to have to do this all over again at another $350 million.
Yeah. Okay, first I'm going to ask John to talk about the added cost, but there is something else to consider, and that's the timing we've talked about. We cannot do 4 lanes without taking more right-of-way. So that's an issue, because that increases the environmental review study. We could not get going this year. Even if we had the funds, we couldn't go, because we have to acquire the land. People don't like to have their land acquired. There's some very, it's important open space.
Between the 4 lanes.
That's what we're using already. For this proposal, we're using the center median. Then John can talk to the added cost.
So based on the planning and environmental linkage study, early studies and all, and the review I did, just looking at the 4 lanes, it's, I would estimate it at about another $100 million. But the most important aspect is really what Mike just said. And even what another earlier person at the microphone stated, by widening to the middle, we prevent ourselves. We're on the cusp of having, very detailed and potentially delays already for environmental impacts as it is. So again, adding that 4th lane is really totally outside widening, and we're really going to have a substantial risk of significantly delaying the project, even to the point of 2 to 3 years for an environmental impact statement, if that would be.
All right, ma'am.
Yes, I have a few questions. Quick though. Can you tell us where all this information will be? Because clearly this is an incredibly political, complicated issue, and we're not going to get to it all today. So can you tell us where we can look at all this information and get more educated about this? And also, how long will it take to get relief? Like once the project starts to when safety and all these things, when do we get relief from all this project?
So the first one is easy, and I'm going to ask John to answer both of them.
Well, we're trying to get under construction this year. There's our website information where you can gather information.
Will all this be there?
Well, I think we'll have to make sure, grab from El Paso County this specific meeting, but yeah, we'll make sure it's linked. And right, if we can keep this thing on schedule, we are looking to start construction this year and then be completed by spring of 2021.
And you'll also be able to get all this information on the El Paso County website as well.
Okay.
All right, sir.
Mike Cloutier, been a resident here since 2000. I could vent for a while, but obviously we're running out of time and I don't want to. And you won't let me, but we
appreciate that.
I'm glad that I still can't come down to understanding the rationale how 3 open lanes will ever be less efficient than 2 open lanes and a toll lane. But you have one of the statements up there, Colorado can't build itself out of congestion anymore. Seems like that's just exactly what we're doing. I'm not sure what that statement was trying to convey.
And that gets I'll respond to that quickly. That gets to the reason for an express lane, and we could have more one-on-one conversation of why the benefit of that is.
Yeah, it just seems we're in crisis management all the time. But my questions here get down to, we're going to forever lament the fact that this is a toll road. I get it. We're fighting a losing battle. Having said that, what is our guarantee on quality control going forward? Because I know that when we expanded going through Colorado Springs, and those bridge overpasses are a disaster, and they're not getting fixed, and each overpass is a launching point for all vehicles, and you can even see the scrapes. And if you've ever sat there and been in a lane beside a truck that is holding vehicles on, you think the vehicles are coming off of the top of that truck.
The easiest way I can answer it is, and those were design build projects, which is a very successful method of doing projects as well, but where we hire a team to design and build it. But we are doing a different method. That allows a contractor team to design it, build it, and really manage construction. We're not doing that with this project. CDOT will maintain full oversight of construction just like any regular low bid project that we normally do. We're just doing a slightly different, what we call CMGC, and again, I can chat with you a little more afterwards about it.
Quality control is paramount. We will address that.
And we are fixing the Nevada Varkrim in the summer. And then for the Cimarron, we did do different construction methods in order to build up the dirt so that the settlement will happen in advance so that doesn't happen again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask you guys this. We're going to tighten this up a little bit.
And then just the last thing, I drive it every single day, and understand you're locked in there for 18 miles, and where it comes to gridlock is in the merging traffic locations. And then as the growth is going to happen here, those two lanes are going to be tied up the exact same amount, even though there's people in the toll lane. What are we doing about the merging issue? Because that's where everything comes to a screeching halt.
So just so you know, right now the plan is that we would widen El Paso County to the middle, all the way to the county line road, and then the toll lane would start from there. So we're trying to, yes, possibly the merge from the 3 general purpose lanes to the 2 general purpose lanes, but then you'd have the toll lane take off from that point. So north of the county line road is where the plan is right now for the toll lane or the express lane to start. And the idea too is with the 3+ and bus staying using it, we would have less cars on the road. So that's our also plan for the purpose.
Yes. Could you put up the slide of the Boulder I-36, the express lane there? This is just more of a comment. In principle, when I think of transportation and the purpose of it, it's to get the maximum amount of people from point A to point B as safely and in as cost-efficient manner as possible. When you look at this, you have what you're proposing, 2 general lanes and express lane. I see maybe 2 vehicles in the express lane, the other 2 general lanes completely packed. And you talk about reliability. I am willing to sacrifice the reliability of having an express lane, for a limited number of people in order to maximize the efficiency for the greater population by having 3 general lanes all the way through. That's just my comment.
Thank you. Sir?
How many in the audience are in favor of the toll lane? Defense rests.
Sir?
My point is that funding of infrastructure and the maintenance of infrastructure is a fundamental government responsibility. And the government in this state, all levels through to the federal government, had failed to manage the priorities of this, in this case the state, and maybe even the county, but the lower, all levels have failed over the last decades. 60 is mentioned by this other individual, 60 years, 6 decades. They failed to recognize their fundamental responsibilities and manage the budget, prioritize the budget, so that infrastructure is maintained. And we've gotten into this crisis situation through mismanagement of all these levels of government because they've invested in social programs that have little return on investment, and have neglected their fundamental responsibilities of infrastructure. So my point is, if the Assembly, the state, and the federal government now, in a crisis mode, trying to address infrastructure mismanagement for decades, if they can't get their act together, then it's time for the people to pass the administrative regulation, pass a bill that fences the required amount of money for our infrastructure. That movement has already been addressed in this state and is building. So it's time for the people to take it back if the darn administration can't handle their fundamental responsibilities.
I'm going to agree with you in part and disagree with you just a little bit there. You know, I can tell you from the county's perspective, we don't feel that this is even our responsibility to be working on this state and federal highway, but we've taken up the responsibility because we know how important it is. And I think that we do in El Paso County a very good job of being a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars, which has created a circumstance where we can invest a little bit of local money into this state and federal project. However, I do agree with you completely in state legislature for 6 years, and I watched our governor increase Medicaid spending in the state by $1 billion a year out of our general fund, which is only, at the time, about $8.5 billion. We've watched programs grow continuously, and we've seen transportation infrastructure spending reduced throughout that entire time. I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with the governor saying, Mr. Governor, you got to get this right. You got to make it happen. You got to prioritize transportation spending. In fact, one of the things he likes to say, by golly, Utah, Wyoming, they spend on a per capita basis more money on transportation than we do. And he says that because he wants to convince you to support a tax increase. But the thing he doesn't tell you is our overall tax burden is higher in Colorado than it is in those states because they prioritize transportation spending the way they're supposed to. I wish I could had an answer for you from the federal government, but it's just completely, absolutely, totally, utterly out of control. And we have a Trump administration saying, hey, we want to try to engage on these transportation infrastructure issues. We're going to do it with what we can, but the money's not there. And because of mismanagement. I mean, if you think about it, the federal government, they haven't passed a budget since 2004. All right.
I was
We've
wondering,
got a little bit of an extension here, but let's try to keep our questions tight and our answers tighter.
I was
Yes,
wondering if the federal grant application is more competitive with the express lane added rather than 3 free lanes.
I think that nobody is in the head of the US DOT. We may have inroads. The current administration has expressed interest in innovative financing. So that would argue that is an express lane innovative financing. But then there may be others that say that's not what they're interested in. So it's difficult to predict. We think when we put the package together that this was a very competitive package because we're ready to go, because it's using innovation, because it's using local commitment. It's sort of what they're talking about.
And I think his short answer there was yes. Yes.
Is this a confirmed HOV 3-lane? And if you've heard from most of the community with regard to the fact that they don't want this express lane, why are we still moving forward in that direction and not looking at other options?
So the use of a HOV, that's still under consideration. What's the best balance to have free HOV? That's certainly on the table. We definitely hear that, I think the gentleman in the back said case closed. Defense rests. We hear that. But we also have a responsibility across the state, and that we are trying to use the resources that we have, because that's all that we can use. We can't use resources we don't have, on how do we best look forward to the future to ensure that we have safe, reliable travel throughout the region, not just in individual locations.
Ann?
Just in closing, the gentleman over here that I term it as we're at the pitchfork and torch part of the program. People are tired of being told what they want and what's good for them. I think they know what they want and what they don't want. And if anybody here wants tolls, please raise your hand. You want tolls? Okay, so are you looking around? Every listening meeting that I've gone to, we've done this little poll and it's about the same. For only 10% of anticipated users for that toll lane. The other thing is, John Caldera has promised me we will have the Fix Our Damn Roads referendum, which will force the state legislature to allocate appropriate budget for transportation. So if the legislature doesn't get it done, the citizens will get it done. We don't have it ready for signature yet, but I'm hoping you will go to my Facebook group. It's Fix I-25 Now. I've been working on this for the last year and a half. You'll find it there as soon as it's available. And I'm also running for county commissioner, and I will tell you, if I get elected, I will not go for tolls. So, thank you.
Thank you for that campaign speech.
Quick question.
It's not a campaign speech. It's
Sir,
the truth.
go ahead.
If you don't get federal money, and I know it's a federal highway, so my question is, can you get rid of all the federal requirements if you use all local money, i.e. Davis-Bacon and all that stuff, because they jack up the price of a project at least 40%, and in some cases 100%. So if you could get rid of the $60 million, I know you can do it on local roads, but I have no idea on an interstate.
Well, you can't get rid of all the federal requirements, and some of the federal requirements that are the most expensive are the ones you can't get rid of. So, for example, you still have to go through the environmental process. Yeah. You still have to do all of that. And certainly I think the Trump administration is trying to reduce that red tape so it's a lot cheaper to do. I think there are some things, what's going to end up happening here is the grant, if we're awarded the grant, that's going to come back, and then we'll enter into negotiations with the federal government on what they want the requirements of the acceptance of the grant to be, and I think that that's something we can definitely work on, yes.
My experience as a traffic engineer, most projects that I have to use federal money, I budget as twice as high as if we use local money. And I assume it'd be the same on a highway project. Just getting rid of Davis-Bacon wages will cut you may be able to build it without the $60 million. If you can do it on an interstate, that's the question.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom Biersma. So it's good that CDOT has decided what's best for us, because it appears to be that's the role of government, is telling us what we need. I would ask that in the process of doing this, that you identify specifically the additional costs related to making it a toll lane, the extra 4 feet of asphalt, the tolling equipment, and all of those types of things. And then out of each dollar of toll money that is created, how is that money spent? Is it spent toward toll administration? Is it spent toward additional tolling equipment, extra people, and those types of things? Because that's a level of detail that's important to know. You can't just say, wait, we have this great income, because there is associated cost to that. Is there more enforcement that you intend to buy more CHP out of this process and everything? Those things we need to know as citizens.
And, sir, in the back there with the hat, did you have another question?
Oh, sure. Actually, this gentleman touched on what I wanted to touch on. If you go back to that slide at US 36.
Yeah, if you can get up to the microphone,
yeah,
please.
if you go to the slide on US 36. You mentioned safety here, and I totally agree. I mean, I've had a lot of times where coming southbound, the truck comes out, everybody has to jam on their brakes. Unfortunately, I haven't been in an accident, nor have I seen one, but I've had a lot of times where I've been in a backup, inconvenience, maybe going to be late to work, and then I see these people that are hurt, and it gives some perspective. So I totally agree, safety is the number one priority here. I don't see how that's the solution, though, because look at all the space there's an example here, all the space that could be used in that left lane there that's not being used. Now, if you have somebody in that scenario I was talking about, somebody slows down, pulls out, and now maybe you might have somebody that's reluctant to move over here into this lane to avoid hitting somebody, or they move over and now they get hit from somebody coming up quicker. How is this safer? I don't really see it.
So we've recently done an evaluation of the safety, the crash record on US 36, and we can make that data available to us. It's a significant increase, significant improvement in safety on the US 36 corridor since this was implemented. One of this is the telephoto lens, so the vehicles look closer than they are, but that's There's no question that the 2 lanes will have more traffic in them than the express lane. That's by design. And it's to keep that reliable flow going in the express lane.
So again, if you have these 2 lanes that are somewhat congested relative to the other one, and you have an incident occur over there, I don't see how that's any safer, unless, if you took all these vehicles and put them in 3 lanes, there's going to be less congestion per given amount of space.
For a period of time, that's true.
We can go back and forth all day.
So it sounds like to me that the express lane is somewhat expedient. It's going to be easier to get it done than adding a general cost and whatnot. But my question is, you were saying that the general lanes cannot be converted into express lanes, but
Right.
can the express lane be reconverted back into a general lane?
Yes.
They can. I mean, that could be an option, if you're making money on that lane, that probably will never happen, but for expediency's sake, it sounds like the express lane is cost-effective.
It's not expediency. The 3 general purpose lanes, if we were to go 3 general purpose lanes, it would be as easy to construct, nominally less expensive, because I think, any toll equipment would not be required. That's not going to be a driver in terms of the overall budget. And so it's really not about the cost, one versus the other. And this is where we have the disagreement. It's about how best to be able to ensure the future until, money falls from the trees, that we can make further expansions across the state. It's about enabling the capacity to grow into the future. That's what it's about.
But it seems like we're going to have to widen it further down the road, even more than just this
Very
express
likely.
lane. So, could that be turned back into a general lane?
Yes, it
And then
could.
the third lane, I guess, or the 4th lane would be the,
You'd still have to, for a
Express
4th lane,
again,
you'd still have to
perhaps.
widen. You'd have to
Yeah.
widen.
because I try not to go up I-70 when I go skiing, but I just don't see the people, even in ski traffic, using the express lane. It's just outrageous. It's like, rental cars, yeah.
The I-70
Home James
express
does.
lane has improved flow for all traffic and reliability. There's no question about it. The data is there. It has improved the travel time eastbound on the express lane.
Okay.
For all traffic.
All right, I think we'll do this one last question here, and then we'll do some parting comments.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment and tying on to this gentleman's comments on managing growth appropriately, and this is primarily directed at you, the commissioners here. I think it's time we start holding some of these developers accountable, and obviously the Banning Lewis Ranch being one. What I see happening over here, I live on off on the west side of Baptist Road. We paid $14.5 million for a bridge that serves only classic homes. That they need to become more responsible for some of these things, and I think we need to stop rubber stamping every plat density increase, because every developer goes for a plat density increase as soon as they start building, and they get rubber stamped from your all's. I could be wrong, but I've never seen one turned down. We need to start focusing on managing our growth and what we really want to become, because we're creating kind of a nightmare, and we're going to be stuck in these crises forever if we don't start looking at it.
And I can tell you, from our new board's perspective, there's some of us have been on the board for about a year, and I think we've seen maybe 5 of these thus far, and we've turned down at least 2 of them. Sent another one back to the drawing table, so I can assure you we don't rubber stamp these things.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so let's give this over. Thank you all for all of those wonderful questions. I think we're going to do a couple of parting comments here, and then we'll enjoy some cookies, and we'll hang around to answer other questions that you might have.
Well, again, I wanted to thank everybody for coming out. I know it's a lot of your time, but it's very, very important. I do want to thank CDOT. Again, I'm Lajinos Gonzalez, County Commissioner representing District 4 in the Southeast. So a couple of comments for me. This is the top transportation priority, I think, for the state. And regardless of the 30 or 40 other important projects, and they're very important, we have the two largest cities, and we, estimates say we will be the largest city in 20, 25 years. So this is the priority, and the money needs to be spent here. I'll go back, the average, if you take the average of the general budget increase, I think it's been almost $1 billion a year over the last several years when you do the average. So that has been a failure at leadership in the state of Colorado for prioritizing roads. If you had just taken 10% of that $1 billion increase over the last couple of years, we would have been able to easily fund this and probably another project somewhere else. And so I'm not going to let the legislature and the governor off. They should have been prioritizing more. They can still do that. I'd like you to go back and ask the governor, why can't you give us an extra $100 million in this current budget to do it? Let's get it. And because to be honest, don't see the prioritization in transportation that it needs to be, and it definitely hasn't been in the last decade. So secondarily, I did have, this is not my third listening, CDOT listening meeting, and I did ask some questions. I have not seen sufficient feedback on options. I'm supporting, we need to get this because it is a safety issue. We need to expand I-25. The gap needs to be done. But I have not seen those options. We did mention $100 million. Tell us so that we can go to the legislature and the governor, get us that extra $100 million if that's what it's going to cost to do 4 lanes. If the option is still only 3 lanes, well, how can we do it without a toll? Well, it would cost us another $1 million a year because we would lose the operations and maintenance. Well, then give us the option, give the public the option of going to our legislature and our governor and saying, put that extra $1 million in the budget so then we can do this without tolls. And that's the thing I've not seen in the feedback, are those available options. Somebody mentioned, well, if we did 4 lanes, it would delay us. Well, tell us, will that be 18 months, 24 months? 36 months, and then we can make a smart decision on, well, it's reasonable for us to delay to do that, or it's not reasonable to delay, but give us those options, and I don't think those are presented. So, but once again, we need to get behind expanding I-25. I'm listening to all the feedback, but it is the top priority for the state, I think, in terms of transportation, and I really do believe we need to get this done for the safety of our people. Thank you.
Thank you. So Stan Vanderwerf again, Commissioner District 3, and that's the west side. So that includes the northwest side of El Paso County, including Palmer Lake and downtown Monument, the part of Monument that's west of I-25. So obviously this project is very, very important for our neighborhood. There's a couple comments I want to make. With regard to the infra grant possibilities, I think we do need to recognize that it is clearly less than a 50% chance that we will receive that infra grant money, and that's going to be a challenge for us. So we may find ourselves in a public discussion about how do we go forward with this project without that money. I have had people say to me, including some representatives from CDOT, and again, thank you for being here, I appreciate it very much. But I've heard these comments that the infra grant gets a better chance of funding if we have a toll lane or a managed lane in the project. I'm here to tell you that the infra grant program is new this year, but it is similar to previous programs. And the research that we have done says that it is not a toll lane that they are looking at. It is whether or not the state and local public agencies are committed to fully funding their share and also to sustaining the road after the fact. So I think the actual requirement for better success with infra grant is to demonstrate that commitment to fully fund and to sustain. Now, a toll lane is one way to do that, but it is not the only way to do that. That can be done with other sources of funds. With regard to a 3-lane where one is tolled and the other option being general purpose, when you toll that lane or when you manage it in some way, it does force vehicles from that lane into the other 2 lanes. When you do that, that increases the density on those 2 general purpose lanes, and increased density means increased wait times and lower safety for those 2 lanes. So the managed lane reduces the number of cars in that lane, and that means increased safety in that lane, but reduced safety in the other 2. And what I have an interest in understanding is, what does that mean for the aggregate for all vehicles passing through? If we have a managed or tolled lane, do we actually increase overall safety, or do we actually decrease overall safety as a result? Because we have the downside in the other two lanes as a result of that. That particular piece of research, that particular piece of data, I haven't seen that information yet. I have asked CDOT, and it was just very recent, so I need to give them the time to respond to that question, but I do have concerns about that. I also feel that we need to very seriously consider 4 lanes. Right now, the current project as it stands is a 64-foot wide highway, and that's with 12 lanes, 12-foot wide lanes, and that's 3 lanes, and then 2 12-foot wide shoulders. That's a total of 64 feet. Now, you can reduce the width of the lanes to 11 feet, and you can reduce the shoulders to 10 from 12, and you end up with a 4-lane highway on 64 feet of pavement. Now, doing that means you reduce the safety of each of the lanes, but you add an extra lane, which improves safety because you reduce density on each of the lanes. This gets to a simulation issue about whether we get overall safety value from a 4-lane highway on 11-foot wide lanes, and I am interested in CDOT providing us research information about the value of that. I do believe our overall number one objective here is aggregate safety, safety for all citizens driving on that road, and I don't believe I've seen the full analysis of that for all of these choices, and that's what I'm looking for. One last point I'd like to make with regard to local funding. We as commissioners committed local funds to this project because the way of the world today is to see local investment or willingness to invest. But you know, it used to be that the feds paid for federal highways, state paid for state, and local paid for local. And there was a reason for that, because as a county, we have 2,100 miles that we have to maintain, and we get no state or federal funding for those. So we've still got to pay for those, and when we contribute our local money to state or federal highways, we do less with our local roads. So this is a concern of mine. Now, in fairness to that, I think this is the number one priority in the state, and we have committed local funds because it's the way things are, and we remain committed to doing that. But on an overall principle basis, you know, I don't like it. I don't like that we have to do that. But anyway, thank you everybody for coming out. I appreciate your questions. I will remain, and I think the rest of the commissioners will remain to answer any further questions, and I, again, appreciate the dialogue very much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here and bringing your questions out today, and thanks for working to gain a greater understanding of the transportation infrastructure needs for the people of the state of Colorado. I think the one thing we've demonstrated here is we don't all agree on how this needs to be done. Certainly, we as a commission have supported a resolution that says we don't want to see a 3rd lane that's a tolled lane. We think that we've come to the table with enough dollars to make this happen without having to toll that 3rd lane. CDOT has a different priority. I accept that and understand that. I think you've heard a lot of us say we'd like to see that 4th lane built now, and maybe you can consider that for a toll lane. I still think that's an option on the table, and that's something we're working really hard on right now. I've worked diligently with my friends in the legislature to see if we can come up with a way to be able to make that happen. But here's what I want to leave you with. I think the one thing that we all agree on, this needs to get done. We can't wait any longer to prevent this highway from happening. We can't just say we don't want to do it because it's going to be tolled. We don't want to do it because it's going to take more local funds than federal funds. We don't want to do it for this reason or not do it for that reason. That time has passed. We don't get to do that. You know, when my constituents elected me to office, they sent me there with a couple of simple charges. Number 1, provide infrastructure. And number 2, do my part to protect the public safety. This highway project is both of those things. It is right in the wheelhouse, and I feel that if we didn't do something about this, if we don't do this moving forward, I'm failing my constituents, and I'm failing all of the residents of El Paso County. So, you know, we have folks that like to stand up and say, don't do this, we shouldn't do it, reject it if it's going to be a toll lane, reject it if it's going to be an HOV lane. You know what? We don't get that option right now. Reject it if you're going to use local dollars instead of federal dollars. That's not our option. Our option's getting this done. Getting it done the best way we can. I think we're going to be diligent as local elected leaders to make sure that we're advocating for your voice, which means we don't want to see that third lane tolled, but we're going to work hard to make sure at the end of the day this project gets done. Because between 2011 and 2015, we saw 5,700 accidents, resulting in 1,300 injuries to include 13 deaths. That's unacceptable. We got to get this done. Thanks for all your support and help on this. I'm going to turn it over to the President of the Board of County Commissioners for the final shot.
Right. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. The reason why, and I'm going to talk kind of in a general sense, for me the most important thing is public trust. When I started hearing rumors in the community that there were people that felt that the commissioners put a question on the ballot and it was a bait and switch, and the fact that we knew all along that we wanted a toll lane and that we didn't put that in the ballot, that concerned me, because that is not true. And I'm standing here to tell you that as a board, we sat there when we contemplated that particular question. Nowhere in that discussion were we thinking that that third lane was going to be a tolled lane, because if we honestly felt that way, it would have been on the ballot. I've lived here long enough. I have seen what has happened when you lose public trust. Trust me, as a city councilman asked about what happened with the city of Colorado Springs when you put a stormwater, impose a stormwater fee on people, what happens. My goal now is to make sure that we hold everybody accountable and have a level of transparency and have a very open discussion. And what I've heard, and I'm very confident, in fact, that I believe that this third lane is going to be built. If the issue is maintaining that, and when we're looking at having to make a decision on tolling that versus finding additional dollars, what I would suggest to CDOT is give us that information so we can put the appropriate pressure on the legislative body to do their job and balance the budget the right way. That's what we need to do. If you need help, that's why we as elected officials, as a community, we can come do that. But what I get concerned about is a presentation that already has a solution in, and then we have an appearance that we're having a listening session. It's really we've made a decision, this is what we're going to do. That's unacceptable to me as a commissioner and then as a citizen. So what I would say is we need to do a better job working together, getting this information out there. We want to continue to have future meetings like this. You have my commitment. We're going to continue to have a discussion with you, not a one-way discussion. So we've got to wrap up and basically clean this area up. I want to thank everybody for coming. Please spread the word that we are trying to do the right thing for the community, and we will be around to stick with you for a few minutes to talk later. But thank you so much for attending. I think we're going to have another one like this in March. It'll probably be in our boardroom in Centennial Hall.